You used to walk into a room and people adjusted. Not because you demanded it, because something about you said this man has been somewhere real. And then one day you handed in the uniform and walked into your first civilian room expecting the same thing. And nothing adjusted. People kept talking. Nobody shifted. Nobody noticed. And you stood there in the middle of a room full of people and felt something you'd never felt once in 20 years. Invisible. Not disrespected. Not dismissed. Just not seen. Like the thing that made you visible had been checked at the door. I'm Robert, retired soldier. Today I want to talk to you directly about what happens when the uniform comes off. Not the version the VA hands you in a pamphlet. The version that actually happened. In 2020, Boston University School of Public Health followed 3,600 veterans through their first 5 years post-service. They measured social identity continuity, how much of who you were during service transferred into civilian life. The numbers stopped the research team. Less than 11% transferred. Less than 11%. The other 89% didn't transfer, not because it disappeared, because civilian life had no system for receiving it. He didn't shrink. The civilian world just wasn't built to hold what 20 years of service actually produces in a man. Childhood version. Work hard. Stay humble. Don't need the attention. Let the work speak. Army version. The mission matters. Not you. Serve without needing to be seen. Both right. Both together build a man so good at not needing to be seen that when the seeing stopped, he had no backup plan. You mowed the lawn before your parents noticed it needed doing. You fixed things quietly and moved on without waiting for credit. Not because you didn't want it, because waiting for credit felt like weakness when you were the only one responsible. A 2005 Journal of Adolescent Research study tracked latchkey children from 1974 through 1989. They learned to feel good without anyone seeing it, which sounds like strength. It was strength. It was also a slow setup for later. The Army put it in a uniform, gave it a team, called it leadership, and for 20 years the man who never needed to be seen was seen constantly, without ever having to ask. And then one day he handed in the uniform and went back to being the kid who got things done without announcing it. Dr. David Siegel at University of Maryland spent 4 decades studying military identity and post-service transition. He found the invisible veteran paradox. The traits that made them exceptional were exactly what made them disappear in civilian life. Because civilian culture rewards visible performance. You have to announce your contributions. You have to perform your capability out loud. The military man trained to let results speak walked into a world where results don't speak for themselves. If you don't announce what you did, it's as if you did nothing, and that felt physically wrong in a way he had no words for. Dr. Amy Adler at Walter Reed confirmed, veterans with mission-based identity showed the steepest identity loss curves post-separation. Not because they were weaker, because the gap between military and civilian culture was widest for them specifically. There's a photo somewhere in your house. Group photo, unit photo, deployment photo. Everyone wearing the same thing, standing the same way, looking at the camera with the expression of people who came back together. When you look at that photo, you look seen, not just photographed. Seen. That photo is still there. The visibility in it isn't. Because the people who could see you that way, most haven't talked in 2 years. Not every Gen X soldier responds to invisibility the same way. There are 3 types, and you'll recognize yourself in one. The overcorrector. He decided he was never going to feel invisible again. So he performs visibility every single day. He volunteers for everything. Leads the HOA. Runs the youth team. Organizes the emergency plan nobody else knew they needed. He is running a full second mission just to maintain visibility that the uniform gave him for free every single morning. And somewhere very quietly, he knows the difference between being seen and performing being seen. The withdrawer. He looked at civilian life's requirement to announce himself and refused. He goes to work, does the work at a high level, goes home every single day without exception. Not because he's antisocial, because every civilian interaction requires performing a lesser version of himself. Performing a lesser version of himself for people who'll never know the difference felt worse than invisible. So he chose invisible, and he sleeps better with that choice than he ever did performing a version of himself that wasn't real. The builder. He looked at the invisibility honestly and decided the solution was to build a world that could actually see him. He found his people, veterans, builders, men who don't need a 3-page explanation of why he is the way he is. He built something with real stakes, real accountability, real people who saw his work for what it actually was. He understood that visibility isn't something you find. It's something you build, the way the army built it the first time. Which one are you? The overcorrector, the withdrawer, or the builder? Drop it in the comments right now. It's not the invisibility itself that does the damage. It's what the invisibility says about worth. He doesn't just feel unseen. He feels irrelevant. And irrelevant is a word a man who mattered every day for 20 years doesn't know how to carry. In the field, your relevance was never in question. You mattered to the mission, to your team, to outcomes with real stakes every single day. And then one Tuesday, in a civilian meeting about quarterly projections that changed nothing for anyone, it arrived. Irrelevance. Quietly. No announcement. A 2021 study found post-service veterans who felt professionally invisible were 4 times more likely to report significant loss of self-worth. Not clinical depression, just a quiet, persistent daily sense that what they were no longer matched what the world needed. These were still capable men, still delivering results at a higher level than most people around them, just couldn't see it reflected back. Because the mirror that used to show them exactly who they were was sitting in the parking lot they left on their last day of service. What if the invisibility you've been feeling since you retired isn't about you becoming less? What if the civilian world just doesn't have the instruments to measure what you actually are? A sonar system doesn't show up on a weather radar. Not because it's not there, because the radar wasn't built to detect it. What if you're not invisible? What if the room just has the wrong equipment? Dr. Jonathan Shea, MacArthur Fellow, found the men who felt most invisible post-service were frequently the men with highest actual capability. Not correlation, causation. The visibility gap was directly proportional to the quality of what they were. Because no civilian organization was designed to measure what 20 years of leading men through hard things actually builds inside a person. Dr. Shea called it the visibility ceiling, the point where a man's capability exceeds what the environment can reflect back to him. You didn't become invisible. You became larger than the room could see. The difference between those two things is the difference between spending your life shrinking back into visibility and building a room large enough. About 8 months after I retired, I went to a parent-teacher conference. Completely normal civilian thing. She looked at me the same way she looked at every other parent that day. Just a dad. And I sat there, completely genuinely, not knowing what to do with that. For 20 years, every room I walked into had a context for me. A rank. A role. A reason for my presence to matter in a specific way. This woman looked at me and saw just a dad, which is fine, which is good, which is exactly right. But I drove home and sat in the driveway for 12 minutes before I could explain to myself why that hit me. It was about the first time I understood, fully, that the identity I wore for 20 years was not visible to the world I was living in now. Stop trying to translate 20 years of service into civilian language. You will spend the rest of your life losing that translation. The men who see you for what you are don't need the translation. The ones who need it are not the audience that matters. Find the room where the instruments can actually measure you. Veterans, builders, men who operated at the level you operated at. 1 room, 2 or 3 men. That is the complete equation. You don't need the whole civilian world to see you. Build something visible, not for the recognition. For the record, evidence that exists in the world of what you actually are and build. The visibility built into the uniform. You can build into your work, your output, your mission. The uniform made you visible. The mission can do it again. If you build one worth being seen for, drop a comment. Which type were you? And how long before you figured out which one? Share this with one man who walked out of his last day of service and hasn't quite been seen the same way since. He knows it. He just hasn't had the language for it until right now. The uniform came off. The man didn't. He's still there, just waiting for a room big enough to hold him.